A survey of how commuters felt about public transport last year has found that bus commuters were less satisfied about waiting times. Those surveyed gave a score of 6.8 out of 10, and that's down from 7.1 in 2022. But overall, commuters were still satisfied with bus and train services. The survey was done last year between August and September by the Public Transport Council.
Now that's right. So to unpack the survey results, we have Associate Professor Raymond Ong from the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering at NUS. First of all, you heard those figures there, but let's talk about the one that will probably stand out the most. 6.8 out of 10, down from 7.1 in 2022. And we're talking about satisfaction being lower this time with bus waiting times. Does that also jump out to you? And why do you think this is the case?
I think we have to look into the perspective of why the bus waiting time has created the decrease of 0.3 points. We can look at it from a few perspectives. The first one is that we are observing that there is in general a general shortage of bus drivers in the industry. And this, despite competitive pay packages, has not really improved the situation of the lack of bus drivers in the industry. And this is exacerbated by the situation whereby we have a lot more new towns coming up in Singapore. And currently, the bus tender packages would still require the public transport operators or the PTOs to maintain the service level, and yet also have to actually take into account of the new town's needs. And this redeployment of drivers would inevitably result in somehow a longer waiting time. And that could have reflected in the score that we see today.
So, Prof, you've really zoomed in on the manpower aspect. What kinds of solutions are there, short of dangling really good pay packages? I think we've seen some of those in the media recently. Great sign-on packages. If that's not going to move the needle when it comes to recruitment of bus drivers, how are we going to solve this problem?
Yeah, this is a very good question. I would have to say that if we were to look into why there is not many people wanting to come forward to be a bus driver, despite the pay packages, it really has to boil down that the graduates actually have much better options. And this result that we have to rely on perhaps foreign workers to actually be the bus drivers. But bear in mind that Singapore is facing an aging population, and our age profiles of our drivers are also aging. And these will only grow worsen over the next 5 years, 10 years. So we have to actually look into new technologies to actually help to transit this forth. And one of it could be autonomous bus that could be deployed on our roads to actually reduce the needs of bus drivers. And I think this is one of the way to go, knowing the fact that we are aging and we have difficulty getting bus drivers.
Just a quick follow-up there. I mean, the technology has been around for a while. I know around One North we've been trialling, autonomous vehicles and whatnot. So for the last couple of years, we've seen the signboards around our office. It hasn't quite translated to the mainstream yet, and I think several barriers remain, sort of like insurance liabilities. Who's going to be held, accountable in accidents and so on and so forth. Are we perhaps legislatively ready to roll that out? Is that ecosystem mature yet, even if the tech is ready?
Yes, I would think that we would actually have to create some trials that actually allow real passenger services, or at least limited passenger services in a controlled environment, so that we can actually create, like you said, a industry that actually has an insurance market for it, and also the ethics legal requirements can be resolved. And I think that once that is done through trials, I think that's a possibility. But I have to say that this will not happen immediately or in the next 3 years. It will take time. And in the meantime, we still have to deal with the shortage of workers.
So there's still that strain in the short term, but it's not all bad news, because in the survey, the trains seem to get quite a good score, a good thumbs up from the commuters. Break that down for us. What are some of the factors that they liked?
I think this time from the survey, we have seen that the train score is improved mainly because of two main components. One is because of safety and security, and the other one is on service information. For service information, for example, we have seen recently that with the MRT systems having certain route changes because of the maintenance programs in the evening, on at nights, on weekends. We can see that the LTA and our PTOs have been very active in deploying people, their staff, to actually down at every stations to actually convey to commuter that there's service information changes. And these can be seen and felt by the commuters. And obviously, this would lead to some form of improvement in this service aspect. Now, in terms of safety and security, I know that the PTOs and the LTA have been very active in developing standards with the Singapore Standards Councils and the Institution of Engineers in Singapore to develop safety management systems to ensure that the network is running safe, and there are protocols to ensure safety not only for their workers but also for commuters. So, and this actually happened in around 2021 until today, and I can see that there are some fruits being bearing out of all these initiatives.
So I just want to take a macro view at this point. Looking at buses and trains together, the public transport system as a whole, it scored 7.8 out of 10, and that's quite similar to 2019. So it's almost like a 4 or 5 year period of time. Is there a sense that levels may have stagnated a little bit, and how do we then take that next leap forward? Is there a glass ceiling that we sort of need to break through?
Yeah, this is a very good question. What we have seen is that these stagnated so-called score of 7.8 roughly translate to about 93% of the users that are satisfied with the network. So if we were to see that how much more can we grow, are we going to go for 100%? And what's the cost of going to 100%? Because ultimately, it will increase the amount of subsidies that we will need to give for the service. And ultimately, the taxpayers with the burden, this cost. So the question then is, how much incremental cost are we going to incur to move that 7.8 or the 93% up to, let's say, 95%? So this is a question that I think the agencies have to actually grapple with in this aspect.
And I think it certainly is the case, especially when they're talking about sustainable spending and whatnot moving forward. Prof, thanks very much for joining us on the show this evening. We've been speaking there with Associate Professor Raymond Ong from NUS.